Well, hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome back to another episode of Addiction. Got a minute? I'm Howie Marlin here. It's Thursday, December 20th, right in front of Christmas. Yeah. In 2018. And I'm joined with my co-host, Patti Pike. Hi, Patricia.
Good morning, Howie.
And we have a guest also from Canada this morning, Sue Donaldson. Good morning, Sue.
Good morning, Howie and Patricia.
Good morning.
Well, it's awfully nice to finally get this going. And, a little minor glitch in getting the program going this morning, but we are in the midst of it, and it's all good. Well, I got to tell you, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
Like Christmas.
Oh, my Lord in heaven. It snowed here the other day. It just gave us a coating. It was like, excuse me? Wait a minute. It was a little too early. And then, of course, now for Christmas, it looks like it's going to be 60 degrees here in New England. Yeah, so much for that.
Is it snowing, though? Is it snow there right now? Or
No. It was really wicked cold the last couple of days, but today it's getting up into the 50s and tomorrow in the 60s. And, well, you know, the one thing we can say for sure is we have no idea what's going on with the weather. So there's so much for that. So let's see. I'll start by saying welcome back, everybody. The onward progression of the program, I really appreciate the fact you folks are listening and hope that you'll be sticking with us into the new year. We've got a lot of interesting changes, including the opportunity to provide the video casting of this. So I'm experimenting with that today. So what you probably won't be able to see, or maybe you will, I don't know. Maybe this is our first video cast. We'll see how things turn out, but I ask for your patience and understanding as we do that. Interesting week for Howie in that the concept of this program has expanded, and with Sue here today, I wanted to take it one step further. We've been interviewing folks who either run programs or interventionists who have certain experiences. And so that's the nature of what we're doing right now in this program. And Sue, let me ask you, before we get to you, Patti, what's going on? What's new in the world of Patti Pike?
Yeah, so I'm in San Francisco this morning and heading up to Vancouver on Saturday. So I'm going to be up there from the 22nd until the 28th. So I'm looking forward to that, to spending Christmas in my country, my Canada home country. And I'm really excited to have Sue on this morning because she's a Canadian, and it's really awesome to be connected with my Canadian folks always first. God, there's like a lot going on for me, but there's not a lot at the same time. A lot of case management seem to be doing this last month. It seems to be all about case management, really working a lot with families, long-term family clients that I've had for the last couple of years, and just kind of gearing them up for Christmas, and also going through a lot of crises. Couple of interventions happening on the side, and just trying to wind some of those up as well. I did have a great day yesterday. I decided to start a running group with a couple of my case management clients, and so I did my first run with a case management client yesterday that got out of treatment about a week ago. And so twice a week, I'm going to go out and do some hiking and running on Wednesdays and Fridays. So I just started that yesterday, and the young man that I took out with me, he was awesome. He's got like 90 days in recovery, and he was an intervention case. And anyway, that was a lot of fun. So anyway, I'm hoping to get more kind of involved in just more activities with some of my clients. So we'll see how that goes in the new year.
Well, that's kind of cool. I really like the case management thing, and we'll talk about that. But you guys are neighbors up in BC, up in British Columbia?
What?
Both from the same province.
Yep.
But Patty, you go back and forth from the States to Canada a lot, right?
I do. Yes, I absolutely do. Yeah, a lot internationally. I do a lot of interventions back and forth.
So,
Patty,
Sue, tell us about your organization and what you do up there.
Me?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So,
Oh, I meant Sue. Yes.
I have an outpatient clinic called Pegasus Recovery Solutions in Victoria, British Columbia. It was founded in 2007. There's a number of different things that we do here. I think probably the key functions these days are the intensive outpatient program, which has been running for about 2.5 years, which is really exciting. It's fairly new to Canada to provide that option for people, and I think that it's a great option. Not everyone needs to be in residential treatment, and not everyone can go to residential treatment. So it's what we're finding, that it's really integrative for people, and seeing a lot of people make really positive changes and get going with their lives. So and then I'm the one in the organization that probably does the most family work. So dealing with some complicated situations right now, Patty, when you're talking about your situation that you're currently in the midst of. I have a couple of those kind of situations going on myself, where just very complicated, and people trying to navigate their loved ones into treatment, but you know how tricky that can be.
Aren't they all complicated?
Absolutely. I'm really excited. I just need to kind of jump in here for a minute. I'm really excited to, just get to know Sue more, because Sue was actually the first person. It was Sue and James Dunn that I reached out to in 2011, when all of a sudden I, had this idea that maybe I could work in the intervention field and work with families. And Sue was actually one of the first people that I kind of reached out to, and James Dunn is also over on the island in Nanaimo, actually. So I was really inspired by, having some Canadian folks that were sort of up there in my country, which, my goal was to really work in both Canada and the United States. So, and then I got to, pick Sue up at the airport just recently for the AIS conference down in Florida. And, we're able to connect more. So I'm really excited to have her here this morning. And I've got a lot of respect for Sue and what she does. And I think that she is ahead of the game in terms of the outpatient programs, an outpatient program in Canada. I mean, that's kind of a big deal, I think. So anyway, hats off to you, Sue.
Thanks, Patty.
No,
Thank you.
we certainly recognize the importance of these IOPs, and I've been involved with programs here where I am as well. How many folks do you work with, Sue, in your organization?
Well, meaning staff or So currently I have 4 full-time staff, and then we also use a lot of contracted people, because we tap people for their specific skill sets and their kind of gifts. So we try to really individualize people's treatment plans when they come here. And so if they have, depending on what they're presenting with, we try to match them for their individual counseling sessions and so on. So we use a number of contracted people too. So at any given time, we've got 10 people in the intensive outpatient program, and the individual clients. We also have 5 continuing care groups running. So we do a lot of aftercare here, which consider a really key part of anybody's process. I often think, treatment's great, but really important what happens after treatment.
I am really thrilled that makes absolute sense. One of the things I petition for universally is for folks to think almost as much about the aftercare process as the event itself. We can go to detox, okay, fine. We can go to crisis stage. We can go to a step down. All these things are good and necessary. But when all that hard work is done, now you have to live with yourself, and you need to create new sanity that replaces the old insanity. You're nodding like a bobblehead, Sue. Go ahead.
I think that that it's like any change that we ever make in our life, it requires maintenance and intense maintenance. So you don't go on a workout program and a nutritional program for 6 months and get fit and healthy and then stop doing everything. And it's the same with treatment. There's the intensive phase of treatment, but then there's the stabilization and maintenance, and that is the thing that makes all the difference, really, in my opinion. So as part of our outpatient program, included in the cost, it's actually a year-long program. There's the 8 weeks of intensive and then 10 months of aftercare. And so again, we just see that as such a key component, to have people that we're staying in contact with, helping them maintain their continuing care plans, their aftercare plans, and stay on track.
I'm just so excited to hear that, because that is not something that I hear a lot. I think that there's a lot of outpatient programs, obviously, in the United States, and that's usually the norm. People will do, either 30, 60, 90 days of treatment. They will, immediately get transferred into an IOP, intensive outpatient program, outpatient program. But then there's that piece. There's that piece of, then what? And what my experience has been, and I always have to go back to my own experience, in recovery, because I am in recovery. And, and that's one of the things that I really have to shout out to Canada for, because we did have a social system that I went through when I got clean and sober. And I had the opportunity to go through a long-term treatment program, as well as do an aftercare program for 18 months. I was involved in an aftercare program for 18 months. I mean, I had that opportunity, and I had that willingness and desire to do that, because I was looking for something else in my life, to do something different. I needed to change, not just the fact that I was using drugs and alcohol, but I also needed to change. I needed to learn the skills of, life skills, education skills. What was I going to do? Where was I going to work? How do I write a resume? How do I get the courage and strength and the confidence to be able to do that? I mean, those are the things that I've been talking a lot this week, actually, here in the Bay Area with, a treatment program that I'm really affiliated with. And those were some of the things that we were talking about, are those exact things. And I think that with Canada, I noticed that even when I used to work at the Salvation Army, when I first started working in the field in the downtown east side, that was something that was a big thing for them to have these aftercare groups. And do you know what? That aftercare group is still going, and that's like 20 years ago. And that aftercare group is still going. And there's some alumni in that aftercare group that are still facilitating that weekly group, right? So that tells a lot. So, I mean, that's just really, I'm really excited to hear that, Sue, that you do have that 10 months of aftercare program.
Well, I'm so totally behind that. I agree with you 100%. It was critical in my mind that folks have hand-holding, guidance, support. And I believe, Sue, in the medical monitoring portion of what you folks do is a piece of that. Why don't you explain that in a little more detail?
Yeah, so part of what Pegasus does too is we have a medical monitoring program, and we work with a lot of organizations that require that their members or employees be monitored after treatment. And this is usually people in safety-sensitive positions, medical professionals, pilots, construction workers, or out here, the shipyard workers, people that are working in safety-sensitive positions are required to be monitored. But what we know, and the research is showing, is that so the groups that are the most likely to maintain ongoing successful abstinent recovery subsequent to treatment are pilots and physicians. And one of the reasons for that, a significant reason for that, is that they're monitored for 5 years post-treatment. And that includes random urinalysis and frequent contacts with a monitor, sort of check-in sessions, and then also being held to account with regards to their post-treatment care plan. And as a result, they tend to do very, very well in recovery. And so we monitor here, the folks we monitor here are usually sent to us by their college or their employer, as they say, and they're monitored for between 2 and 5 years. And it's really, again, in the interests of aftercare and how are we helping people stabilize out and make those changes you referred to, Patti, all those multitude of changes in every life area. Takes time. That's the thing with addictions recovery, is it takes time. It's not just about stopping the use. I like that iceberg model where we look at only 15% is actually the substance use. The 85% of things that need to change, and people need support to do that. So.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
What's wonderful to hear is that your understanding of, it took us how long to get to the point where we come before you for help? It's taken us years for addiction to ingrain itself and control our lives and take over and start to destroy things to the point where we found it necessary to reach out. So if it took all that long for you to get there, then it's going to take some time to get back on the other side. And that's the beauty of your understanding of that. And the cool thing is that if we all start to understand that we need to be patient, we need time to create sanity back into our systems, then the whole family dynamics, the support of family, they gain understanding. To be patient and understand that we need to keep this going. That's why the outpatient programs, any organization or effort which will allow people to continually focus on staying sober, staying in their lane, staying clean, is critical. Because if you're left to yourself over a certain period of time, your internal supports will start to wear away. And, addiction pulls you back down. It's this never-ending bungee cord, I call it, where it's always got this pressure. It's always pulling you. And you're building pilings against the bungee cord. And over time, the pilings outdo the bungee cord. So after a certain amount of time, you've created these pilings so strong that even though the bungee cord still exists, it really isn't going to be effective. Anyway, that's a little visualization that I have. But it's wonderful that you do that. One of the things that have been really, one of the points that you made, you said it was pilots and was it the doctors who have a higher rate of remaining sober. Clearly, the responsibilities these people have. I mean, it goes without saying, a pilot or a doctor has lives in their hands. But don't we all? The only difference between a commercial pilot and anyone else is the number of lives in their hands. So I really like that visualization, and I really like being able to share that with clients, that you have your life in your hands, but you actually have more than yours. Go ahead, Sue.
Well, that is just so true because, what we see is that if you are a pilot or or a medical health professional, you're going to get intervened on. You are going to probably get sent to treatment. You're going to, be required to do this monitoring because your license is going to be at stake. But we forget that everybody has circles that they impact. Really, everybody. When I think a lot about parents and the impacts to children. When parents have substance use disorders, making treatment for those people really readily accessible and available, and the post-treatment support accessible and available, so that those lives can be positively supported and impacted. Because you're right, Howie, it's like this ripple effect. Addiction has a ripple effect, a catastrophic ripple effect, but so does recovery.
Well, that's a good place to pause for a moment. We're going to take a little break, and we'll be back in just a moment. The views and opinions expressed on this show are of the hosts, the guests, and callers. They do not necessarily reflect the views of Addiction Got. Well, apparently, we need to work on that, and I'm not quite sure what the problem was there, but we'll be back. And we'll fix this in post, they say. Okay, well, we're back, folks. Thank you for your patience. I'm with my co-host, Patti Pike, who's now in the Bay Area of the United States of the Americas, and also joined by Sue Donaldson from Pegasus Recovery Solutions in Victoria, British Columbia. Sue, thank you very much for being with us today. I really appreciate that you're with us. So we were talking about the long game. We were talking about the ability to look into the future, understand what it takes. Not look into the future, excuse me, that was dead wrong. Our ability to understand that it takes time for people to recover, to build new sanity systems. And we were talking a little bit about the fact that the post-treatment programs need to be incorporated into treatment plans. Now, one of the things that I've found difficult to do is to find people who will commit to a lengthy post-treatment program. Again, Sue, you're acknowledging you've been through this before. What kind of carrot do you hold out to folks? What do you do to encourage them to take advantage of long-term treatment?
Well, it's interesting. I really think that it's important not to tell people the whole story up front. Most people really come into treatment desperately wanting a solution, but not wanting to hear that the solution is a really lengthy, long-term process. So I tend to think of it as sort of a step at a time. First things first. If they need intensive residential treatment, get them into intensive residential treatment. But then I do believe it's part of the job of the treatment to help people understand that addiction is a chronic condition that needs long-term support and treatment, and to get people engaged with that idea. But I think we can really overwhelm people if we, and often when I work with families, I'll tell families what the long game is. But I really encourage them not to overwhelm their loved one at first. Really just, getting their loved one into treatment. First things first, and then sort of staging it from there.
Hallelujah. The first things first, dripping these things on people, one drop at a time. I find, I've never done it, but when I've heard of people being given the whole enchilada at once, it overwhelms them. Now, the way I can relate to this is getting people into a long-term treatment program. I broach the subject as try it for the first week. Try it for the first month. Go for the first week. I know you'll be uncomfortable. It's a strange and interesting place, but let's talk again at the end of the first week, and then give it the month. Give it the month, and then I talk to them again at the end of the month. Let's give it a few months, give it a few months. By then, they've started to realize what healthy life is like. The clarity to their lives have come back a little bit, with a little bit of the substances out of their system. Then you can, hey, so how do you feel? Hey, yeah, things pretty good. Are you going to stick around for a while? Yeah, I think I'll stick around. So now they go through that process. I want to just take a minor step to the left. You've heard of sobriety coaches, recovery coaches, people who will take the hand of the recovering person and help them enjoy life, remind them to take their medications, get them to medical appointments, make sure they go to, chiropractor or the gym, or that they get to their AA meetings or self-help meetings. Do you folks, Patricia, Patty, Sue, do you guys use coaches or sobriety coaches of any kind?
Go ahead, Sue.
We actually, one of the gals who works here is a certified recovery coach. That idea of recovery coaching is a very specific skill set. And then some of what you're talking about is that sort of sober companion. There seem to be a few roles for people in this field now of those types of supports for people. It seems to be burgeoning, actually, that field. Is that your take on things, Patty?
Yeah, I think that as far as my experience with I don't specifically use a lot of sober coaches. I will at times. I obviously have some folks that I kind of lean to. I've got folks that will help transport people to treatment at times, or if some family member needs help with getting them started, to take them to meetings, to appointments. I definitely can access, those types of folks. I tend to lean to the community for that. I lean to the community that, like some folks that are really specializing in that type of service. That's it. My focus is really is interventions. My focus is now starting to move into maybe, working with folks on more of an outpatient basis when they come out of treatment, and really trying to implement some types of alternative treatment other than just, didactic education groups, process groups. I definitely encourage all of those things, obviously. But my focus is going to be more on the aftercare part, more on, the running groups, the acupuncturists, helping them create resumes, helping them to develop life skills, really getting them, connected with a psychologist or an addiction doctor or a medical doctor. So I really want to, that's going to be my next phase as far as, Can-Am interventions, specifically here in the United States right now. Eventually I think that my Canadian connection is going to be mostly trying to implement as many treatment, trainings, obviously intervention trainings, case management trainings. I think what I'm excited that Sue was talking about this outpatient and aftercare component, because I'd like to see that more on the mainland, more in the Fraser Valley area, especially in Vancouver, because there's so many folks that have gone in and out of treatment that, it's not that the treatment program doesn't work or the treatment that they've done doesn't work. It just means that they're done with treatment. They need to have a different modality where they can start to live life. And I'm more focused on that living life, because I can get the person into treatment. That's not usually the issue. I can work with the families, but it's sort of like, what happens to that person when they come out of treatment and they start to unwind, they start to deal with relationships and, and all the family issues that come up. Though that seems to be more of a focus that I'm trying to focus on.
All of what you've shared are these incredibly important components to what we as professionals in this industry can offer. Having resources, whether they be sober companions, sober partners, recovery coaches, what have you. Who is it? Arthur Westinghouse's his partner, Diane Buckley. She's a sober companion, and she was telling about helping. And there was somebody forgive me, Patti, didn't we just talk to somebody who was
yes, Kathleen Parker. She came on the show. Yeah, she's down in LA, and that's what she specializes in sober companionship. And I think that's the other side. You know, which lane are you going to be in? I mean, you don't have to be in every lane. You know, there's a lot of folks out there that do really well with sober companionship. I mean, I worked in treatment for 17 years before I became an interventionist. And, you know, in every aspect, it's not really something that I like to do is sober companionship. I think that there's a lot of folks out there that do really well with that. And I think there's a place for that. But Kathleen she was amazing. You know, she's got that kind of energy to be really in the moment of the client and help them, you know, to kind of take those steps to integrate into the community, recovery community.
Well, I just want to give a big nod to Kathleen. You could probably hear the papers rustling in the back. I was trying to find my notes. Yes, Sue, go ahead.
Well, I just what's coming up for me in this conversation too is the need to. Well, not everyone can afford to continue paying for professional support, either recovery coaching or sober companion, or the majority of people can't. And even those who can, I think it's important to talk about the recovery community as a whole and the value of getting people connected to that. I see that as such a critical role of ours, is to help people connect in a healthy way to that enormous global community of support. And it is enormous, and it is a global community, and it's free. It's free, and there's guidance and wisdom and people that want to help support individuals. So I think that helping people navigate that the mutual help, self-help support communities, as in AA, NA, LifeRing up here, LifeRing or Smart Recovery, but with those 12-step programs, AA and NA being by far the largest bodies of support that's available out there. They're in most countries in the world. You can go to most cities in the world and find support for yourself. And so I just think it's important to remember that all of that. So part of what we do is help get people connected to that community. And sometimes I think that's the most important thing that we do, is help people navigate and find a place in a community which is, supports and encourages clean and sober living, whereas our general society sure doesn't, so if people can find a home in that community, awesome.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to get a Groucho Marx duck. Ding, ding, ding. Say the magic word. Duck comes down. Give you $50. You said the magic word, connectivity, connection, and I think, Patti, that I'm going to get a duck, and I'm going to get the magic word thing. So when people say it, we'll get a sound effect in the whole 9 yards. Which is pretty kind of cute. I'm going to work on that.
That's awesome. I like it.
The reason why it works for me.
So you have to wear a duck suit, though.
Yeah, I could work that out. Connectivity. Everything we're talking about has to do with bringing people back into connections, the network with people who they love and care about and are interested in, and that they are interested in love and care. It's a push me, pull you kind of thing. It's completely surrounding. And what we're doing when we talk about aftercare, and Sue, what you're talking about is getting people reconnected with all sorts of things which acknowledge that they have a life to live, that they can do it with vigor and with enthusiasm. There's always struggles. Don't get me wrong. Just because you're in recovery doesn't mean that everything's fixed and perfect and I'll never have to mess with that again. Excuse me? You have to mess with that every single day until it gets softer to the point of it not being a major issue. But the connection, getting people back together. Now, let me take one sidestep. In the recovery coaching program that I'm referring to, there's 2 levels. One is volunteer and the other is professional. We were talking about professional recovery coaches, sobriety coaches, travel companions, and that. There are also the CCAR program in Connecticut, the Connecticut Community for Addiction and Recovery, have a program of developing recovery coaches, which I'm one. I'm a certified recovery coach and certified in the ER. So it allows me to understand the nature of the emergency department, how to stay literally in my lane out of the flow of traffic there, but who to call on for help and how to get the help in an emergency department. But the people I'm talking about that I would like those of you who are listening to get in touch with, look up ccar.org and find the coaches in your region. And I hope that this moves on to Canada as well. These are folks who are sober a year. All it takes is 1 year of sanity behind you. And the virtue of this is by living a sane life, making good decisions as far as substances and other things, and you're helping someone else helps you, of course. It reminds you, of course, every day when you talk to that person, all the issues which are germane to the problem of the pull of addiction, you're helping someone else with. And of course, you know who benefits from it. You do. So that is critically important. And I have this visualization, this scale in my mind of what's happened in our society in as far as the dependence on opiates. We've got this unbelievable scale tipping one way. Well, with each new sober person, and this includes alcohol too, with each new sober person, if you get them to help somebody else, guess what? The scale starts to equal, and maybe we might tip it the other direction. Listen, we've got a big fight ahead of us. It was amazing. There was a commercial on an NFL show, on a football game last week, where I could hardly believe my eyes, where among all the advertisements for the show, there is a commercial for substance abuse and ad care. This is right in the beginning of the show. And I was just like, this is amazing. I mean, this is what has happened to our society. It's gotten to the point where we're living two separate psychic states. And maybe we should just let's take a moment to take another pause, and we'll be back in just a minute. And hopefully this time this will work. The views and opinions expressed on this show are of the hosts, the guests, and callers. They do not necessarily reflect the views of Addiction Got a Minute or the organizations associated with them. All right, that keeps us legal. At least that worked. Yeah. So where were we before I rudely interrupted you?
I was sort of writing down a bunch of stuff because that's what I do. It's how my brain kind of works. And I always draw diagrams just because, it sort of makes a lot of sense to me. If I have to write a lot, it just means that but I like to draw in diagrams. And what I was thinking about, I want to go back to what Sue is doing because I think it's phenomenal. And it really brings me back to, what I learned in the early days of working in the field as well as in my own personal recovery is like that 2 years. It takes 2 years for, drugs and alcohol to really get out of your system. I mean, in terms of not just the alcohol and drugs getting out of your system, but it's the lifestyle, and what can you do in that first 2 years? And I think it's like so important to have that foundation. Like, where is your foundation? Because a lot of folks that go into an inpatient treatment program that have a desire to want to change their lives, a lot of the times they come from a place of isolation. They come from a place of like not really interacting with families, having healthy relationships, and everything is a secret. Everything is like hidden, whether the person is a professional or if it's someone that's on the downtown east side of Vancouver or Tenderloin in San Francisco. I mean, I think that the isolation and the lack of skills to socially interact with other people is very uncomfortable. And it's, and it can be really, there's a sense of loss of letting go of that type of lifestyle that they've been living. So the foundation of folks that, get out of an inpatient treatment program and start to come back to the community, there's such a need for that to have that foundation, where they can kind of land. Yes, AA, NA, I think that those are amazing, amazing parts of recovery for some folks. Life-ring, there's all types of self-help groups and organizations that are creating more Al-Anon, ACOA, refuge recovery. I mean, those are all great free services that are out there, and definitely a huge part of, how we have been able to build on the resources that we can provide for our clients. But I also think about the attachment that folks have, the attachment issues that folks have when they leave treatment. And they are still in that kind of place of frozen fear of how do they connect with other people, and I think that having an organization, what you provide, Sue, is like having that 10 months of aftercare. Where have you? I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that in the United States. Personally, I have not. That has not been something that I have. It's always the outpatient. It's always the PHP, the IOP, the OP. There's always like the step down, IOP, outpatient, or PHP and outpatient. But I've not heard a lot of the aftercare part. And I think that, and one of the other things that I was thinking about, Howie, is what you said about the, having those recovery coaches, at the ER when folks overdose and when folks end up, in the hospital and at a very vulnerable time in their lives. It's about life and death, and having someone, involved in that process, because that's really where the intervention can really happen. And maybe you might be able to get someone into a treatment program or into a detox, but then the aftercare part, it's just like that piece is just so not touched, and it's really inspired me to think more in terms of, where I'm going in the direction of 2019 for me, because being a Canadian, I was very, very, I was very fortunate to have a social system behind me. I was able to lean on the medical system, back in 1991 when I got clean and sober. And I was able to lean on that for a couple of years so I could, get treatment, get some life skills, get some resources in a community so I could become educated and employed. And I think that that's something that we are missing. I think that we're missing that. I definitely feel that we are missing that piece. So hats off to you again, Sue.
Well, I think I'm inclined to agree, Patti, is that we get very focused on the upfront stuff, like how are we going to intervene? How are we going to get this person into treatment? What treatment center? What's the best treatment we can send them to? But if we're not thinking about the long game and keeping them engaged for, you mentioned that first 2 years, the amount of healing, the amount of change, and the amount of brain healing. It's a brain disease. The brain needs time to heal, and then the individual needs time to learn how to regulate. They're dysregulated generally. They need to learn how to be with themselves, be with their feelings, learn how to connect and have healthy relationships. There's so much. So when we started the outpatient program, we originally started it with 4 months of aftercare attached to it. And we found that just it wasn't long enough. And we got together as a team and decided that having people connected to us and to groups here for a full year gave them that much more of an advantage. By the time they're on their way from here, they've really got their roots in the process, and so I really agree with you. It's always been a strong belief I've had that the supports afterwards are so critical.
One of the things that you guys have touched on that is an intimate concern of mine is what I've learned over this last year with regards to what happens to people when they have a stroke. Now, when we talk about the medical condition of dependence, we're talking about the brain being rewired. And I'm sure most folks who are listening are familiar with medical miracles of people who have either had severe brain injury or something like that, where people have been able to recover the capabilities to do things. But in recent time, what we're finding is just how elastic the brain is. Elasticity and the ability to not only, in some cases, regenerate, but more often than not, reallocate systems in the brain. Whereas if you lose a portion of your cranium somewhere, that other portions of the brain are able to assume those capabilities. And there are people, including a wonderful woman named Laura, who I'll give a shout out to right now, who my heart still pines for. And I remember I'm so fond of everything that has to do with this person who had a severe head injury and completely recovered. Completely, 100%. And the glory of that. Now, move towards the thought of what the process of addiction is, the rewiring of the brain, and talking about now the length of time it takes in post-treatment for these systems to become accustomed. Folks who work with me know about my cow path idea. The brain, it's like cows going down a path. The first time you do a drug, a cow goes down in the grass, it passes through the grass. You don't even know that the cow went down. A few cows go down the same line, a few lines of Coke, a few drinks, and pretty soon the grass isn't growing. Well, leave it long enough, and now you get it worn down. That path is now worn down in your brain. You get enough of these cows going, and it's a wide, long path. This is people who have been doing substances for a long time. Stop the cows from going. What do you get? You still have the path. You may have growth, overgrowth, covering it over, and that's part of the healing process, and that's a wonderful thing. However, you get one mad cow that wants to go down that path again, knows exactly where to go, and off to the races, which is just amazing. But that's my little metaphor. But when you talk about the necessity for the overgrowth to grow in on this cow path, give it a year, and there's quite a bit of overgrowth. Give it 2 years, and it's going to be kind of hard for that cow to go down that path. Not a bad metaphor, not a bad, visualization. So we need time, and getting people involved in systems, all the self-help, whether it be Life Ring or, the self-help organizations, absolutely. And then take it one step further and get involved with something physical to physically get you out of the environment that brought you to the dependent world. Now, it's very different for all of us, and I'm not going to be so bold as to say I've got your solution. I don't, but you do.
Right.
your amount.
Well, I was thinking about the assessment phase, right? So, I mean, back when I went to school, when I started, at Vancouver Community College and took the addiction studies program, which is a 2-year program. And I think it's a great way of folks that want to get involved in working in the addiction field to start there, especially if you're in Vancouver. I mean, there's many all over. And I think that the first thing that I learned was the assessment phase, and was really kind of assessing folks, when they came into treatment. Now, when a person comes into an inpatient treatment, usually there's an assessment. But as you kind of go through the phases of, recovery, I think that this reassessment, is really important to try and identify not just about like all the traumas and all the different issues that come up for folks when they go into initial treatment, but also looking at, other aspects of life, so I think that I don't know. I know for me, when I'm working with families on interventions, for example, I really put forth a whole process of assessments where I can assess each individual in that family, where I can best meet their needs. And I think it's the same thing for folks that are going into treatment, because every person is going to have some different issues and different things that they want to focus on. And I think I think a lot of folks are kind of like I'm not putting anyone down, but I don't hear a lot about assessment anymore. Back in the day, there used to be, that was a huge word, and I was just kind of sort of thinking about that as we were sort of talking. So anyways, that was my thought.
And that I like that, Patti. I like that idea of ongoing assessment, and that's I believe our job as addictions treatment professionals, is to be assessing the people we work with on an ongoing basis. And Howie, one of the things that came up for me when you were talking about the cow path is that other things besides cows use those paths. So what we find is that people stop using alcohol and drugs, but people are very resourceful when it comes to changing their brain chemistry through other behaviors or other substances or other, so that whether, I mean, I can give some examples, and the things people get into to mood alter in recovery. So part of the role of the ongoing assessment and the aftercare is to help people navigate those things when they come up. For example, usually the first go-to, and this will sound familiar, I'm sure, to both of you in working with people, the first go-to is relationship. Yeah, generally what people go to mood alter with is another person. So their drugs and alcohol, they've moved away from that, and so they look to mood alter with that. Or there's a host of other addictive processes that people can get into as well. And so yeah, that ongoing assessment, or how people, because it's the brain, it's the addicted brain. You get the substances of preference out of the way, and there's still those cow paths. They're still well-trodden paths that, they may not be able to use crack cocaine to travel down the path anymore, but they'll find other things. And so much of the aftercare process is supporting people in choosing those healthy behaviors and not defaulting to those things that just mood alter.
Well, you're absolutely right. I think the thing that has the core part of the discussion this morning is post-treatment aftercare, and or we can probably come up with a better name for it. But universally, in our discussion this morning, we all agree that each of these steps are hard work, no two ways about it. Convincing somebody to go, the motivational interviewing components of actually getting somebody to buy in. Once they buy in, they go through the detox. Once that difficulty is over, then to treatment. And then I have to say that for me, I'm thinking there's probably another phase or phrase we can use for what stage of treatment. Because if you get the luxury of going to a program that's a year long, that in itself is incredibly constructive because of the consistency of care during that. And I'm sure that a lot of folks are familiar with a program called Teen Challenge. And I work with, I've just placed another person at Teen Challenge who is doing incredibly well. They're a 15-month program. And, for a reason, for a good reason. So maybe that's something to think about. Maybe we can move forward on that in discussions in the future. We have just a few moments left. Anything more about your world, Sue, that you want to share with us before we jump off?
Oh, I think we've talked about a lot of things today. I'm not sure what else there is to touch on, but I've sure enjoyed sitting with you folks here today to see you and connect with you.
Well, I got to tell everybody that when I got my training, intervention training out in Minneapolis with Sue and about a dozen other folks, Deborah and Jeff J. were our fearless leaders. And so here's a shout out to you guys. And it's amazing because I had been doing interventions before my training with Jeff and Deborah. And oh, my Lord, what they opened my eyes to. And it's allowed me to walk away from a couple of interventions where it clearly wasn't going to work. I could see the axes. I could see the landmines. I could see those things based on the structure that they helped us with. That was enormously helpful. And I have to say, too, I haven't worked with a family since that training that I haven't referred to pick up the book, or both the books, but the book No More Letting Go by Deborah J. and the co-author she wrote that with, whose name I can't remember offhand, but, yes, I can. Deborah J. Oh, no, that's her book. She's the sole author. Fabulous book for any families to start really getting a clear idea about what's going on and what needs to happen. And their website is an absolute wealth of. They've been so generous with regards to the podcasts and the video clips and the articles that are on there for families. A huge resource. That was something I really took away from that training, Howie. And thank you for bringing that up. What is their website? Lovefirst.net. Mm-hmm. And what's the book that you referred to? This book, actually, this No More Letting Go. It's the spirituality of taking action against alcoholism and drug addiction. And this one's Deborah J. It's just a kind of little manual. It's a great manual for families. Everybody I've referred to read it has thanked me for the recommendation. An absolute how-to, and it's wonderful. I give them to the premier family members as a gift in preparation, and I found that to be really beneficial. So that's part of the thing there. Anybody else you want to shout out to? Anybody you want to say hi to? Oh, I can't think right now. So I'm just seconding your suggestion to Jeff and Deborah. Okay, well, that's cool. Patti, how about you?
It's been really awesome today to be here, to be part of this, and to have Sue on the show. I think it's just such a intelligent wealth of information. Have a lot of respect again for what she does. So I really appreciate what you're doing in Canada and Victoria. I guess the folks that I'd like to shout out to, I went to hang out with Altamira treatment program in Sausalito on Monday, and hung out with the team over there at that treatment program. And I just want to shout out to Altamira treatment program. They're a great program in the Bay Area.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate that very much, Sue Donaldson. It was really wonderful to have you from Pegasus Recovery Solutions in Victoria, British Columbia. Well, on behalf of Sue and on behalf of Patti, we'll see you next time.
I've got a saying that describes my efforts. The best I can do is the best I can do, and I will. This brings us to the end of another episode of Addiction. Got a minute? I wish you warm breezes and clear sailing. Till next time, I'm Howie Marlin.